Well, hi, welcome to the Tri Show. I'm with me is someone who probably most people know. So, and I will share. So, Lucia, and I'll let her introduce herself. Just a reminder that the Tri Show is designed to increase our understanding about trauma and resiliency. Views and opinions of our guests are always their own. And Lucia, I want to say, you started this conversation. You had a conversation with Tracy Parsons about some of the needs that were happening in the community. And he and I were having a conversation. And I thought, boy, this is an important conversation to have. So we brought Centoya Brown here last week and started one part of the conversation, but know that the issues impacting people in our community who might be immigrants or refugees or a slightly different conversation. And so wanted to have a full conversation about vulnerabilities, but also strengths and resources. So welcome. And I'll let you introduce yourself just in case there are like 5 people who don't know you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me here. Lucia Maldonado. I work for Urbana School District. I'm the Latino Family Liaison for Urbana School District. I had been in the community for 28 years, something like that. I'm an immigrant. I came here from Mexico when my daughters were really young. So I went through the whole experience that many of the immigrant families in the community have going to. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. So can I ask to share a little bit more, because although you came here, went through the journey, I know you have been an activist champion, sort of a go-to community leader for as long as I've known you. And so I think maybe about, I don't want to date us, but
I know.
a few years.
A few years.
A few years. So tell me a little bit about the work that you've done. I mean, just in case people don't know what your role is at Urbana Schools, but also some of the work that you do in the community.
So I had been working with school districts for a very long time. I will say close to 20 years. I actually started in Urbana many years ago, and then I moved to Champaign for a couple of years and came back to Urbana. The whole time my work has been providing assistance to families, immigrant families who just arrived in the area and need to register kids to school. But when I started doing that work, I realized that, like me, a lot of the families needed a lot more supports and services, not just registering kids to school. So I started expanding the supports that we provided through the schools and started connecting families to services, just the same things that I wanted somebody to do for me. And I always say that I feel blessed that I'm in a position where I can do that for people, especially people who just arrived in the area, don't know anybody, don't speak the language, and need help basically with everything. In my work with Urbana School District for the last few years, I think one item that I really like to talk about every time I get a chance is the services that we provide to unaccompanied minors. And this is something that we're going to talk more about, I'm sure, later. But we have an increased number of children who are traveling from their home countries to this community and through the rest of the country and are here completely alone. So it's completely different when you work with a family, when you work with adults and children, but working with children who have nobody else is completely different. So that's a portion of my work that I really liked. I had been involved with many of the local organizations that provide services to immigrants. I was actually part of a group that started the movement to create more support and more organizations. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, I had some health issues, so I had to step down from all my work in the community and just focus on myself. Now I'm doing a lot better, and I'm trying to go back into doing a little bit more like before, because I really feel like it's important for those of us who went through the same journey to assist the ones that are just getting here and getting started.
So right. So as hopefully the audience can tell, Lucia's had a depth and breadth of knowledge. She understands the community And she's hinting that some things have changed. And so, I mean, I know when I ran into you several years ago, you started talking about some of the traumas of unaccompanied minors. And so people it may not be on the radar. So can you share more? Because again, this is not something that has been a long-term issue, but I know it keeps growing and growing. So can you talk about when you started noticing this change and what are you talking about? Just in case there are, again, some people who may not know what you mean.
Sure. Actually, it's been for a very long time. I think the first unaccompanied minors started showing up in our district probably around 11, 12 years ago. But we had very isolated cases. Maybe one kid who just showed up with a family member to register to school, and then we learned that he was actually here without his parents. And but the numbers had been increasing every year. It used to be only boys, unaccompanied minors. First of all, unaccompanied minors are basically children who leave their home country. It used to be only children from Guatemala. They leave their home country and they travel with a human smuggler through Mexico to get close to the border. And the goal is to get to the US. Now, in the last few years, I will say the last 5-6 years, we have seen kids from Guatemala, from Honduras, a couple of kids from El Salvador, and now things are going to change again because now we know that there are a lot of families, I'm sure everybody knows, a lot of families from Guatemala in the border and getting into the country. So I know that we're going to see kids from other countries now, but it's very difficult. It was very difficult for me at the beginning to begin to understand why parents will send their kids alone through a journey that is so dangerous. I have heard horrible stories from the kids. We have some kids who know exactly which drug cartel works in each state of Mexico just because they were with drug cartels when they were moving up to get close to the border. And many of them don't have an idea of how dangerous that was. They tell the story as just as something that happened to them.
Like an adventure. Yeah.
Yes, like an adventure, not really understanding. I will lie if I say that things haven't changed for me, especially in the last years that I have seen more and more girls going through the same journey. When it was boys, it was hard, it was difficult, but we always try to provide as many services as we can in connecting them with as many resources as possible. We're very fortunate in the community that we have more resources for them now. But when I started seeing more girls and the girls started getting younger and younger and younger, I had a lot of concerns. And to be honest with you, working with these kids after a while, because they don't have anybody else, they start going to you for everything. I get some, not a week goes by without me getting a request from at least a couple of them, especially at the high school level. And some of the requests are just, it made me feel like they just want their mama. They just want their mom. They just want somebody to do something for them because they're completely responsible for themselves. They don't have anybody taking care of them. They don't have anybody looking out for them. And they're supposed to. I mean, every single kid that is here has a sponsor who helped them get out of the refugee resettlement center. But they don't really provide a lot of support to them. They don't really. I haven't met a sponsor. I have a couple of sponsors who are very good. Many of them, unfortunately, are not really providing any support to the minors. So what they get from the school, they get from us. But like I said, it's been hard to understand, and when I hear the stories and I hear what they went through and I hear what happened, I kept wondering, why are their parents putting them through that? And my other concern is that all of these kids, as all the other adults, are here with the idea of finding a job, working, making some money, and sending money back home to assist the family. So when the adults go through that, I mean, they understood that they were going to be doing that. That was their mission. But it's very hard to see 14-year-olds really concerned because they haven't been able to find a job, being forced to do work that they really don't like, that they really don't see themselves doing, but they're doing it just because they know that they have to pay. They have a lot of money to pay the smuggler. They have to send money back home, and they now have the responsibility to provide for their families, probably for the rest of their lives. So it's very hard. And I think that puts kids in a very difficult position where they have to choose work or ways to make money versus anything else. And their education, for instance, we have many students who have registered to study school and then after a while just drop out because they own so much money, and it's thousands of dollars. I don't think people realize that human trafficking is a huge business.
Okay, so we're gonna get there, I promise. Okay,
huge business. It's incredible. Yeah.
So before we do there, because in this complex political social environment, this question of why would a family allow, encourage, support, need their child to make this pretty harrowing journey, and some children don't make it, right? What has become your understanding, if you're really going to try to humanize the students that you've had to work with? Because to say that, oh, it's just for work and to sending money back home, there are a lot of people who would kind of roll their eyes and think, yeah, but I know, because again, I've heard you speak, it's far more complex than that. So if we were going to try to, make sure people had some empathy to the issue, what do you think people don't understand about why you would risk that?
So some of the reasons kids had shared with me are because they were extremely poor in Guatemala, for instance. They never had enough food to eat. They have siblings who didn't have food. Some days they have to, if there are several children in the home, some days they have to choose who eats today and who waits until tomorrow. So it's poverty for a lot of them. Is not really a lot of opportunities. I have heard some kids that their family decided to send them here because they knew that after a specific grade, in fourth grade, usually fourth grade, fifth grade, if you don't have money to be sending your kids to private schools, then they can't go to school anymore, and their life will be just working in the fields as their parents and their grandparents, and again, that doesn't really provide enough funds to feed your family. So but the real decision, I guess, is different for each child. I have heard several different reasons. Like I said, I was having trouble with understanding about girls. Why will parents, and I have two daughters, and I know that I wouldn't be able to do that. I was trying to put myself on their shoes. So I actually went to Guatemala in the summer, and I thought it was going to help me understand. I wanted to see what they were talking about. I wanted to see where they're coming from. And I thought that it was going to help me understand. And it was actually the opposite. Because
Really?
the places that I visited were beautiful. And again, it's so complex that even people in Guatemala don't have a good understanding of the issue. I was in Guatemala City and I had conversations with some people there, and they were not even aware that there are thousands of children coming this way by themselves, that there are hundreds or probably thousands of children still at the border trying to get into the US. And some of them were saying, oh, it's just because their parents want them to keep sending money this way, so they're sending their kids there. But it's a lot more than that. I mean, I have met so many students, and many of them, when they arrive, the only goal that they have is to be in a school, to find a job, to be able to pay the money that the family own, to keep their family safe, because there are always threats about if your child doesn't pay the money, something is going to happen. But it's different for each student. some of them, when they start working and they feel like they see that they can actually be able to make enough money to pay their debt sooner, that's when they choose between school and just working as much as they can. But it really is hard to just pinpoint one thing, because there is different for every child. And the interesting thing that is happening recently is that some of the children that arrive here younger with at least one of their parents, and it's usually the fathers. Some of these fathers came here just with the idea of working and saving money so they could go back to join their family in Guatemala and maybe start a small business or buy land or build a house. But some of these kids who now have been here for 5 or 6 years are saying, I don't want to go back. I want to stay here. I want to stay in a school. And now they're starting to think about the future in a different way than what they were thinking about when they were back home. So it's really complicated, because I have had conversations with some of these parents, and I have said, so what are you going to do if she doesn't want to go back when you're planning to go back in 1 or 2 years? And they're saying, well, if she wants to stay, she can stay. But we're talking about kids that are 12 years old, 13 years old. So, yeah.
All right. So complicated. Some of the needs are financial. Some of it is basic. Some of it is invisible, because even when you were there, you couldn't see it. So if other people are like, well, I went to Guatemala and it wasn't that bad, know that there might be complexities of needs that are invisible. And you keep hinting that the needs, the journey for girls, the journey for boys, harrowing. Some of them sort of chalk it up to an adventure. I know some of them, because I know you were concerned about it, particularly a few years ago. Some of them have really experienced or witnessed a lot of adversity along the way and have, been through some stuff. But you sort of hinted that for girls, it's a slightly different journey. Can you say more about what you have heard or are hearing?
I think when I know about the first of all, when the family makes the decision that they want to send a girl here to the United States, at least that's what I heard. I can only talk about the conversations that I have had with some of these girls. So when their parents decided that they were going to send them here for whatever reason, they look for a smuggler there in Guatemala. So all the arrangements, at least with the stories that I know, all the arrangements were done in Guatemala. Like I said before, smugglers have a really good business going. They actually go to Guatemala. They actually meet with families. In some areas, some of the girls are saying that the smugglers have even business cards that they just leave in different places for parents to find, offering their services, or flyers. So when the parent decides that it's time for the minor to travel, they meet with a smuggler, and the smuggler offers different options. If you have more money, or you want to pay more money and you don't want your child to suffer, we can offer you this package where your child is going to be traveling in a car, and they're not going to have to walk a lot. It's going to be very quick. In less than a week, they're going to be by the border. If you don't have enough money and you don't own properties in Guatemala, then it's going to take longer. And then they don't promise parents that it's going to be quick. It's going to take longer. Your child may be traveling in a bus, maybe walking, maybe it's going to be walking for long periods of time, maybe days. Some have to be forced to be on the train, to travel on top of the train. So really dangerous stuff. But parents hear about that when they're making the arrangements for kids to come here. So they are aware. I think the issue comes that is saying what they're going to do is one thing, but what happens next after they turn their kid to this smuggler is completely out of their control. Some of the kids said that their parents were promised that they were going to be traveling in a car just very comfortably, just by themselves or a couple other children. And that was not the case. They were in a car, but they have to be hidden in the trunk, and they have to be just sharing the very small space with a lot of other people. I recently heard from a kid who got here not very long ago that he actually was put in a truck, in a big truck, with a lot of other people, and he stayed in that truck for many, many days without food. Just the smugglers were giving them just a little bit of water. Their parents didn't know that that was going to happen. They didn't agree to that, but because they agreed to having him go with this specific smuggler, and the smuggler had to change the route and had to change the way that he was moving people up, that's what he had to do. So parents agree to something, but then what happens after the kids leave their home is completely out of their control, and of course completely out of the control of the children. So yeah.
Okay, so I feel like I'm having you sort of talk and talk and talk, but I think just informing people about this, because it's not something I think is visible to many people. So you're hinting at this, that it sounds like part of the other issue, not only just the journey, but the process, the how it happens is also part of the potential risk of vulnerability and harm for children as they make that kind of treacherous journey. And you keep talking about the smuggler, and we've been talking a little bit on this show for the last 2 episodes around sort of trafficking and human trafficking. And so would you argue or assert that part of what is happening is some trafficking as kids migrate across the border? And you talked about the contract that parents make with smugglers, but also that kids sometimes have to pay back part of the fee for their journey. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, in my experience, kids are the ones responsible for paying, because most people in Guatemala don't have the money that they're charging. We're talking about thousands of dollars. I don't think people are aware that the rates right now are between 10,000 and 14,000 per person. And people don't have that amount of money. So that's the money that some of the children in the community have to pay back with interest. Once they get here, and if you don't have the money, you start working, you have to pay interest. One of the reasons why many students leave school and they just find 2 or 3 jobs to be able to pay the money faster. But yeah, it's a lot of money that they have to pay, and as smugglers really don't care what kind of jobs they're doing. They don't really care about how they're going to be paying that. There's always threats involved about the family that is back in Guatemala.
That's what I was going to say.
So yeah, and I don't think enough people are aware that happens here in the community all the time. That is happening here in our backyard. We have some smugglers here that have a really good business going, and it's very unfortunate because some of these kids are here because their parents make a sacrifice to be separated from them forever, probably, just to be able to give them more opportunities, or to put them in a place where they will have more opportunities for a better future. That is very, very hard to achieve when you from the first time you arrive here, you already have a debt of $14,000, and if you're working only part-time because you're going to school, then when are you going to be able to pay that with interest? So it's
or because of child labor laws, right? Because you're a kid and you're not supposed to be working 60 hours a week.
Gosh. Yeah, right. Well, we're not going to talk about that because there are a lot of businesses here who don't really care about that, and they're hiring children. So
yeah, so hopeful, again, complex needs, complex issues. So beyond just the having made the journey, which I'm hoping people would have some empathy around what that journey could be like, because for some people it could be a short journey, but you could get stuck at the border. For some people it's been a much longer journey. I've heard, again, with limited food and water, the border, I hear, can be really, really complex depending on what happens. And there have been periods of time in the last few years where lots of adversity has happened at the border, by not only people who you could get stuck with, but also by Border Patrol, by people policing the border. There's all that adversity that happens just when you have a bunch of people that are unattended and unsupported. So, right, imagine your child being vulnerable out there in the wilderness with adults who are also needy and desperate, and that comes with a variety of different complexities. Am I right, Lucia?
Yes, yes.
And then to think that finally you arrive in a place with not necessarily a large community, feeling under-supported and under-resourced, maybe even feeling like the contract that was made, because again, if you get released into the States and into our community, you think you're going to have a sponsor with support. So multiple people have broken promises. You might feel like your parents broke promises. The smuggler might have broken promises. What you did to survive at the border would probably be filled with broken promises. And then you get here and more broken promises. And then you come and you're like, I'm here to sort of provide support, be a trusted partner, to build relationships, provide you with some measure of safety. That has to be really complicated for people. How is it that you inspire confidence, build trust, help people feel like you won't be yet another person who is designed to exploit, take advantage, or use them in some way?
I think for me, it's a little bit easier than for the other liaisons that are working at the elementary level, because I work with kids at the high school and middle school. And we have years ago, we started a food pantry so we could, because we realized that of the huge food insecurity that they were facing. So we now have a food pantry, and I start bringing the kids right when they register to school. We show them the pantry. We give them a really good idea of all the services that we have available for them. And once they start seeing me as a constant present, I think that's when they start trusting and they start sharing. And after that, it becomes a little complicated. If we had been getting new students almost every month. Almost every month we had been registering new kids. So it gets a little complicated when we have a lot of kids and all of them are calling and texting, asking for things and asking for help. This morning, I went to the DMV with one of them because he needed to get a TVDL. So a lot of things that are not really part of the school system, but we know that if we don't help them, they don't have anybody else to do so. So once they start seeing me like that, like the constant person that is able to provide assistance or answer questions, we get a really good relationship going. I think it gets a little more complicated for the other parent liaisons because they're working with adults, and as adults who did the same journey with children, I think when they finally get here, everything starts sinking in, and the realization of, okay, now I'm here, but I don't have a job, I don't have a work permit, I don't speak the language, nobody speaks my language because I don't even speak Spanish well. But then I have to provide for my kids. I have to find housing. My sponsor is not really helping me. He's charging me money for everything: rent, food, transportation. I need clothes for my kids. And so I'm pretty sure that their needs and their desperation, at least the first couple of months is worse, just because they have little people, kids that depend on them. So I feel like for me, I got it a little bit easier in that aspect because I'm working with kids who can express themselves, who can call me, and I always give them my cell phone, and I get texts at any time in the day. I communicate with them directly, but for the other liaisons that are working with families that are in these really, really tough situations, it's really hard.
Yeah. And it sounds like, although you said we have a community that is well-resourced, it sounds like there are some gaps in the resource pool, right? There might be well-resourced, but there could be needs beyond just sort of the basic needs. There could be navigation, community, social, emotional, grief and loss, and just adjustment needs that are not explicitly met. And that there's a pace of life that you have to live because you start off indebted. So if you came with child, if it's $10,000 to $14,000 for one person, imagine that exponentially. So your ability to sort of have the time to process, deal, manage, feel, all of that might also be really complicated. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest obstacles for adults to get services is fear, because they know that they're getting pressure from the smuggler to pay them back. They know they're getting charged for, the sponsor is charging them for things that he or she is not supposed to be charging them. But they know that they can't ask for help. They know that they can't talk to anybody, because if they talk to somebody about it or they ask for help, then their family back in Guatemala could suffer consequences. So I think for a lot of the adults, that fear keeps them from actually looking for resources and or accessing services or supports they need. For children is trust, or at least that's what I've been finding out. We have a really good, for just as an example, we have a really good relationship with the legal clinic at U of I. So when we get new unaccompanied minors, we make sure that they receive legal advice from an attorney. So I set up appointments and we take the students to the clinic so they can meet with the attorney privately, or the attorneys come to the school and we arrange a space for them to meet privately. The kids won't meet with them if I'm not there. They always ask. I always try to explain, this is a private appointment. You're going to talk to the attorney. They speak Spanish. You're going to be able to communicate with them. And most frequent than not, I get requests from the students for me to be there. Yeah, but you're going to be there, right? Sure. If you want me there, I can be there. So it's just trust. But I mean, who can blame them? They have been through so much, and just thinking about now trying to understand a legal system that I know nothing about is another layer of complication. It's one more thing that they have to do.
Yeah. And if you've listened to media or news, or probably having anybody talk about it, there's so much misunderstanding, so much miscommunication, so many things that would induce fear. Like if it's, because there have been people who've gone to meet with attorneys. I know we had a couple of incidents several years ago where people were immigration services, so people were deported, and and I think that those kinds of things sort of serve as acts of work with me, right? Like induce fear in a community, because people then just start to feel like, okay, so is this a situation where I'm going to go and I think it's a good experience, or that there's allies and really they're going to be people there that are going to, send me back, and then and imagine what that would be like to be sent back, or to have the fear of deportation. It doesn't eliminate the expense.
Exactly.
You still would have to have the smuggler fee and try to reset, which is why then some people make the perilous journey yet again, because they could see that as the only way out. Am I missing something, or is that correct?
No, that's absolutely correct. But the other thing that I wanted to share is also that there are a lot of attorneys who had been taking advantage of this issue, of this increase of trafficking, human trafficking. I have had so many people sharing their story that they hired an attorney in Chicago, especially. They hired an attorney. They started paying the attorney thousands of dollars. In the past, I had kids at students at Urbana High School who were paying attorneys, sending monthly payments to attorneys, $300, $400 a month, $500 a month. And every time I asked them, but what is the attorney doing? Why are you sending that money? Oh, because he's working on my case. But what is your case? There is no case. She really is not working on any case because there is no case. Is she applying for asylum? Do you know what she's working for? What application she's filling out for you? No idea. Wow. Kids or adults, many adults just hire an attorney just because they know that person is an attorney, and then they put their trust completely on that person and they start sending money. And after a while, and that has happened over and over and over and over again, after a while, they just received a letter saying their asylum application was denied. He didn't have enough proof that made them qualified for asylum. So all the money that they were sending, all the money they invested in that attorney is gone to waste, and they have no case. So that's one of the reasons why we started that relationship with the legal clinic here at U of I, because they're right here, so we can take kids back and forth every time they need an appointment. But that is also another reason why it's so hard for people to trust, because they hear these stories about people who had spent thousands of dollars on attorneys just to find out later on that they don't have a case and that they have to start over or just stay in the limbo with no status.
So talk about, right, levels of predatory behavior. So we've talked a lot about vulnerability. I have one more question about vulnerability, but then I want to shift a little bit. What do you think people get wrong or don't see, or that you would want people, right? Like if there are a lot of compassionate people in the community, but there are also people who are just have blinders on. What do you think people get wrong about this issue of unsupported children or immigrants coming in, or refugees coming in from Central and South America, right? Like, what do you think people get wrong?
It's hard for me to think about just one thing. I will say it's been hard for me to understand, and I really don't. It takes me a while to understand sometimes, but I have an opportunity to talk to them directly, to hear their stories, to learn about their life in their country. And all of that starts helping me understand better. I think people make a quick assumption that people are here just because they just want to get a better job or get economical opportunities, and that's important, and that's part of the decision, that's part of the package, but it's not the whole thing. Everybody has different reasons. We have people from Honduras who are here because they were really afraid that their kids were going to be recruited by one of the maras. We have people from Guatemala who are here because in the area where they live, which is really far away from the city, right up in the mountains, they really didn't have anything. Food was very scarce. They didn't have a house. They didn't have enough food to feed their children. I have had moms telling me that when they arrived here with their children had to adjust to having food daily, because they were so used to not having food daily or eating just once a day. So they said it took them a while, weeks, before they were able to actually digest 3 meals a day, just because they were not used to that. Their bodies were not used to that. But it's different depending on the region. And now families from Venezuela, they're just being displaced, and they're just being here because of all the different policies of their president. So that's many of them. That's why they're coming this way. So it's different from each country, and we will have to have conversations. And I hope that one day we can do that. I hope that one day we can provide spaces where people can actually feel comfortable and safe sharing their stories, because when you don't do that, you don't help people understand. And I want to say that if more people understood, I think things will be easier for all of us. And even in the immigrant community, right now, I'm a little afraid that some things are going to start happening in the immigrant community, because we have immigrants who got here 10, 15, 20 years ago and are still undocumented, because there hasn't been one way for them to become documented, to change their status. And now, and they never got an opportunity to apply for anything, asylum or any other way of relief. But now we have a lot of people, new immigrants who are just arriving in the community, who can apply for asylum and very quickly get a work permit. So you have on one side, you have immigrants who have been here undocumented, not by choice, for 20 years. And we have immigrants who by 6 months here, they get a work permit. So that creates a little bit of conflict in between the immigrant community. I'm starting to see that more often now. So
yeah. And I can imagine also that some of that has some ageism, right? Like that there are different people with different age issues, right? And that creates a different level of complication because, right, we have a world with ageism, and one would anticipate that there are things that younger workers would do that older folks may not feel like comfortable doing, may not be able to do physically, may not be desirable for, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so Lisa says she's here. Ha ha ha. Like she's supposed to join us. So we invited Lisa to join us from the Refugee Center to help sort of broaden this conversation. And also, right, I think that would be a perfect segue because she could sort of give language to what you were talking about, some of the more complex issues.
Oh.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for messaging.
Sure.
Welcome.
I was watching for a while and really enjoying it. But I don't think she knows that I've tried to
I
join.
did not know you were here. So welcome. Can you introduce yourself? I think it was a perfect segue, Lucia. So you set up the perfect transition. You introduce yourself and share a little bit about your work.
Yeah, I'm Lisa Wilson. I'm the executive director of the Refugee Center. We're an organization that serves as a remote refugee resettlement agency and also as an immigrant resource agency. We do a lot of work with immigrants of varying ethnicities regarding public benefit applications, interpretations, translations, serve as a liaison to help them with whatever situations they need. Also referrals to healthcare, mental health care, dentists, lawyers, etc. So we're an Illinois Welcoming Center, which means we provide wraparound case management services, and we're open Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 or by appointment.
Okay, so perfect. And so we'll make sure I put in the chat after the show, like how to find Lisa. Okay. So we've been talking a little bit, yeah, sure, you've heard a little bit about sort of how needs have changed. Lucia was talking about some of the issues of smuggling, trafficking, sort of the invisible underground that exists. And she was talking about it primarily about people coming in from Central and South America. Is that sort of, what is similar about that more broadly when we look at the immigrant population or refugee population? Yeah, how is that? We were going to extrapolate because I know there are, individuals coming in from across the globe that people may not be aware of.
So refugees have been outside of the country usually for several years, waiting for to be granted refugee status and then to come up in line for their time to be resettled in the U.S. We don't see trafficking as much among that population, especially because here in Champaign-Urbana, as of right now, the only refugees and special immigrants we generally see have ties to the area. So they know somebody. It's a relative, it's a former co-worker. So when they come, they're usually coming to somebody who is expecting them, who is preparing for their arrival. We obviously prepare for their arrival. There are funds available specifically to them being a refugee. They get a stipend, a one-time stipend from the State Department. And then they're also immediately eligible for public benefits in the state of Illinois, which includes SNAP, Medicaid or all kids, and either TANF if it's a family, or something called refugee cash assistance if it's a single person. So there are some support structures in place for them. Where the Refugee Center has helped with trafficking has been immigrants who have come undocumented across the border. And what's so tragic is that under the circumstances they've come, they don't even realize that what's happening is trafficking and is against the law in the United States until somebody else tells them. So Courage Connection has been very helpful with that. Now, unfortunately, to get to Courage Connection, usually one of the victims has been a victim of domestic abuse of some sort, and then they go and they tell somebody their story, and then they say, wait a minute, I think you need to talk to an attorney. So we've had a couple cases that were referred by Courage Connection, a couple cases that were referred by an Asian American organization. But generally, these are people who are being treated terribly, and yet don't realize that they have any recourse. They have been intimidated, they've been lied to. They feel very vulnerable. They think that the minute they complain about anything, they're going to be deported. It's a really terrible situation because the only way for an undocumented person to apply for what we call a T visa, a trafficking visa, they have to cooperate with police.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and that's a really hard ask. I
Yeah.
mean, they're so fearful with good reason. Unfortunately, we do see situations where we know people should be reporting, but they can't be convinced to do it. So it's really tough. And this has been coming up more and more lately. I think there is a little bit more general awareness. I know the Unitarian Universalist Church has an immigrant justice task force, and we meet monthly for an immigrant collaborative meeting. Jess DeVries at the New American Welcome Center, myself, some people from Immigrant Services of Champaign-Urbana, other interested parties. I know Lucia's joined us from time to time when she can. And we talk about issues and advocacy in the immigrant community. And they have become much more attuned to the fact that there's some rampant trafficking going around Champaign County. And it stands to reason with the number of immigrants that are coming in. It's just the odds are that they're coming in, they're being sponsored sometimes by people who are then taking advantage of them, or they're being, they came in with relatives that are now keeping them to stay home and cook, and you can't do this, and you must pay me for that. And it's just really difficult situation. So I think we're all trying collectively to do our best. I think it would be great if we could sit down with local police authorities in town and talk about the rampant
Really? Okay.
proliferation of trafficking and what to look for, and some kind of understanding of the issues that some of these immigrants are going through, and how they are just very fearful of the one organization that could help them to attain legal status in some cases.
Wow. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. And when, you heard maybe a little bit, Lucia, talk about this. And I'm also imagining if you owe money or your family owes money, to cooperate really creates a complication for your family, because you would say, well, I could cooperate with local law enforcement, but that doesn't protect my family wherever they might be. And
Right.
what guarantees that what I do here will make any difference with the overall safety of sort of my larger extended network.
Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah. And
okay.
the court system is so backlogged. I mean, I can't blame them for being scared.
Yeah.
It's taking asylum cases are taking years. That's unheard of. Trafficking visa, an average of like six years for some cases.
Wow.
Yeah. And in the meantime, there's some funding available for trafficking victims, but not that much. And it's just a really tough place to be in. And, without comprehensive immigration reform, there's some of these problems that, as much as we can try and help solve them, because immigration law is federal, it's going to take Congress to act and to give employment authorization to people who have maybe been here for 15 years and have been paying their taxes and have been working. Unfortunately, that's something that even Governor Pritzker can't control, because that's federally granted. Yeah. So, and immigration law and policy, it's very complicated. And unfortunately, that's why people don't understand some of the situations that are in, and why people get taken advantage of by unscrupulous lawyers. I mean, we had a situation where some of our clients who had free local representation were still paying some guy in Texas to take care of their case. When we found out, I was just like, what do you mean you're paying this guy in Texas? Why? We have this wonderful Department of Justice representative who's representing you for free. And they just get taken advantage of. They just hear a bunch of stories and, oh, we've got this, and no, you need to go through me and I can get this done for you. And it breaks my heart. Absolutely breaks my heart.
So Lucia, do you have anything? Because it does sound heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Also, a little bit disempowering because it's hard to figure out, what people can have control over, where power is, where maybe local people could leverage, right? Like, I'm sure you're like, what is it that people could offer and do to do something about it? But Lucia, do you have any thoughts?
One thing that I've been wondering for about 2 or 3 years, I travel to Colorado almost every year, and we drive. And when you get outside of Illinois, almost or very often when you stop in those in the road, in the, what is that, visitor centers or the restrooms, I see stickers with information about human trafficking. And if you're a victim of, nobody has the right to abuse you, nobody has the right to keep you against your will, in different languages with a phone number, and you can call if you need help, call us if you need help. I haven't seen that in Illinois. Why? What is that? So I ordered some posters actually from the one organization that I didn't want to order, Immigration, but they have some really good posters about human trafficking and where to ask for help, and what it gives a very clear idea of what is not okay here in United States. Because like Lisa said, some of these kids, some of these adults don't even recognize that what is happening to them is not okay. What is happening to them is abuse, but they don't know that until somebody points it out. So one very simple thing we could do is just start a campaign so we can have more of that information very public in the community, at public health, in places where kids and adults actually go and sit down and look around, on the bus. If you need help, call this number. A lot of times I think it takes a lot from them to be able to call that number or to ask for help, and they're usually going to do it to somebody that they feel comfortable, like I shared before. But I know that they know the Refugee Center, they know the New Americans Welcome Center, and if we also have that around the community, I think we can have a better chance of people asking for help when they need to.
We have a lot of trafficking information that we can distribute.
Mm-hmm.
And we can, it's from the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants, but we can alter it to put some local stickers on there, so there's a local number to call. So I will work with my staff on that.
That's great.
That's a great idea. I know. I love when we problem solve, and I am next time that I do the Tri Show, I actually have someone from the Central Illinois Human Trafficking Task Force who's going to join us, and then from the Chicago organization called Traffic will join us after that. So, but I love the idea that we could collaborate to get more information, and because a couple of things that you've hinted at, and Lisa, part of why this conversation happened is because Lucia mentioned it to Tracy Parsons, and then that sort of increased people's understanding. And I know over the summer, we talked about this at the Mental Health Board, right? Several families that people were concerned about. There were several things that were happening in community that started to raise people's alarm. And I also know, right, I think people also aren't really necessarily paying attention to things like the rise in like massage places or spas or all of these other places in the community where people frequently, unfortunately, are there not necessarily fully consenting. So some of their labor a lot of their labor isn't their own. They're not necessarily getting paid equitable wages. People are frequently involved in exploitation, and so in preparation for today, I know one of the biggest quotes or takeaways that I got was that a lot of the labor force, a lot of the trafficking is driven by demand, and that as long as people continue, and not that we want people to not be employed, but as long as people are willing to exploit people's labor, pay underground, do all of that, the more people will continue to sort of be taken advantage of, and so I don't know how we increase our human capacity or desire to treat people better, but it seems like that's sort of at the root of some of this, is that we're letting a lot of exploitation happen.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, we have to be very careful about, who we hire when we go out and get services. For example, we had a group of men in here last week who came to us because the general contractor who hired them disappeared. and that's wage theft.
Wait, so-
So there are lots of issues like that. So we as consumers should be very careful. And you know, we're in a smaller community. We really can get to know the people that we do business with. I think it's probably harder in the larger metropolitan areas. You know, somebody comes to do your roof and you don't really know who's working on your roof. So I would urge people to, you know, just pay a little bit more attention. Just look around a little bit more and look at the people who are working in the place that you are visiting and you're a business invitee. You know, what are their mannerisms? Do they look like they're afraid? Do they look uncomfortable? And you know, that's a start. That's
Yeah.
a start, just to be really cognizant of who you're hiring, who you're getting services from.
That is a great point, Lisa. In the last 2 years, I have had at least twice I stopped by a house when I saw that roofers were on the top, and I saw children there. And in one of those cases, it was a student from the middle school who was not coming to school. And I was driving, and I always look because I always want to see that they are using the right equipment. So I always pay attention. And I recognized a little face, and he's 12 years old, and he was in a roof carrying materials up and down a ladder. So I parked my car. I'm in a point in my life where I really feel like I don't know why, but I really feel like I can do that. So I just went straight to the person in charge and I said, I'm sorry, but this kid is coming with me because I know his age. No, he's working. He's 14, he's 15. I'm like, no, he's 12. He's a student in my school and he's coming with me. And I met with his mom and talk about it and help her understand that that was not okay. But that happens so often in this community. Not only companies that are hiring children, but also restaurants and other places. So yes, that's a great point. Just pay attention. Who's working in your house, who's working in your street. And if you see something that shouldn't be happening, please speak up.
And to be, you know, Lisa, I saw you were getting ready to say something, and I just want to add, I also hear, like, one of my big takeaways is be a lot more compassionate, because you really, in this time where people can be so judgmental or cruel or mean or project, you know, worst thought things, you just never know what people are going through, what they've gone through to be here, what, you know, their daily lived experience. And it seems like we just need to be a lot more loving with each other. What were you going to say, Lisa?
I was just going to say that, you know, in so many of our immigrant communities, you know, you have to be cognizant of the fact that the educational requirements are vastly different than they are in the United States. That compulsory education can end at a much earlier age. And because they owe so much money, you know, the parents, they may love their children very much, but the fact of the matter is they need money. And so the message to the children is work as soon as you can. But, you know, we as immigrant advocates and, you know, children's advocates must, you know, protect them and let parents know that that's not legal. It's not okay. And most importantly, it's very bad, you know, for the children and their future. And we need to protect them under these circumstances.
So I hear several strategies, and then I want to make sure I leave room to see if you have anything else. So one, it seems like Lucia suggested at some period of time, and this would be phenomenal, to find a way to bring in the voices of people with lived experience to sort of definitely humanize their journey, tell their stories as they feel safe, right? And to find spaces and places where that happens, because as long as something is invisible, I think we have a cloud of secrecy, and so it keeps itself perpetuating. I also heard you both suggest that we need to increase awareness about resources, opportunities, and inform people about what's available. Lisa has some resources, Lucia has some resources. I will make sure we get some resources from the Central Illinois, and we want to see, right, think about a strategy where we get those out and about in the community. And then I heard the need for maybe even having the opportunity for more advocacy or alliance between law enforcement and maybe even the legal system and people who are immigrants, so that they can maybe think about some problem solving and bridge building with a lot of intentionality. And it will take some building relationships, having a sense of trust, having maybe even awareness of all of the complications at home about what it means to sort of move forward. And maybe even that's a state's attorney's conversation too, who would be involved in some of that. Anything else that you would want to sort of suggest as takeaways or next steps that you'd want the audience to sort of think about or listen to?
One thing that I will always think about is in the last 2 years, we had 2 girls who came to the school to register and started attending a school. One was 15 years old, the other one was 12, not related to each other, different sponsors. And after only a few weeks, they just disappeared. One day they stopped coming to school, and I went to the sponsor's house. And in the first case, the sponsor's family didn't even know who she was. So she was never in that house to start with. And I never knew what happened to her. The story I got was that a family member came from a different state to pick her up. Second case, a girl who wasn't even able to communicate in Spanish. She spoke a language. She was the only one who spoke that language at the middle school. And same thing, after a few weeks, she just stopped coming to school. I went to the house and she disappeared. I was told a grandfather came to pick her up. One thing that I would love to see is the Office of Refugee Resettlement to have a system to not to release the kids so quickly and to have a follow-ups. Because once the sponsor sends proof that the children are registered in school, that's it. The office never checks back on them. So what happens to them, we don't know. And these 2 girls are always going to be in my mind just because I don't know. And I'm not sure that they are really safe. I don't know what happened to them. And the fact that they couldn't even communicate in Spanish, it breaks my heart.
Wow. No, that's a very good point, because the minors come in and they get an ORR letter saying that they're eligible for benefits, and then they go through this, reunification process. Sometimes they're in processing centers, and then the phone calls start and the forms start flowing, and then they get placed somewhere, and maybe a bus ticket is provided, and they get sent someplace. But then what happens after that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know we're done. Thank you so right. Boy, what a heartbreaking note. But be concerned, because we've got what the National Center for looking at Black and brown girls of color, how many, statistically Black and brown girls of color go missing every year, and it's an epidemic and it's catastrophic, and frequently what's happening to them is heartbreaking. So be concerned. Let's not make this a one and done conversation. I'm looking forward to continuing this work because it's in our community, and it's part of if we want to be a resilient and well community, we've got to care about those people who are most vulnerable. So I appreciate you both for all that you do. You're sheroes and champions and heroes who give tirelessly to making this community better. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for this opportunity.